Hey everybody, welcome to the Autopilot On podcast. My name's Scott. My co-host John is here with us. And this is, I don't know,
What's
the
going on,
pilot
guys?
episode 1. What are we calling it?
Yeah, yeah. I think Autopilot On is a great name. It's exactly what we do once we turn Autopilot on. Above 10,000 feet, we let the rumors go. We let the industry knowledge start ripping, and just all things what pilots talk about once we get above 10,000 feet. That's what we're here to talk about.
Yeah, man. Sounds good. Well, let's start with some intros. Tell me about your background, or tell everybody about your background. And yeah, just give us some info about you.
Yeah, sure. I'm probably more of the typical background to, I would say, the average path now of what most people my age, I'm around later 20s now, came up and basically went to UND for my training up in Grand Forks. And then I transferred down to a different school down in Arizona. And from there, I worked on all my licenses through the 141 program, but then I got my generals done at that community college because that's how they did it. From there, I worked and transferred those credits to Embry-Riddle, and I could do CFI and college full time. So usually it's a little bit different for doing the 141 program with college class at the same time. I can basically go 2 times faster. At that point, I think once I graduated got my college degree along with my flight training, um, during that time, I guess you could say, and we can talk about this later in the episode, COVID hit. So things were
Oh,
really up in the air. And then
yeah.
afterwards, I came out of kind of that huge COVID hiring spree. So I got on with Regional Airline on the West Coast and spent about almost 2 years there. And
Okay.
then I got on somewhere flying an Airbus. That's kind of my path. It's pretty typical, I guess you could say, but I know was yours a little bit different. I can't remember your exact training starting out.
Yeah, I went the non-traditional path. I did all my was it part 61? All my stuff part 61. I was going to community college for it. What I ended up doing was taking the max student loans I could for my community college and then taking all that excess cash and using it for flight training since I was in a flying
Nice.
program. I didn't go through the school's program. It was a 60 part 61 program anyways. I ended up going and I found a
Okay.
non-traditional route too. There was a guy who had like a blog, I guess, which is like the early version of these podcasts kind of thing for flying. And he had a
Sure.
instructor out at Van Nuys Airport in Southern California. He was flying with his instructor, and I was following his blog. So I ended up reaching out to him because he lived close by, and we ended up getting together. And he introduced me to his flight instructor, which was he was 80-year-old British guy who had like I don't know 10,000 hours or something, flown everything and anything, and it was
Yeah.
awesome. So did my flight training with him, got my private, and then started working on my instrument. Did that. At that time, I had the choice to either go to ATP or continue on through the local flight school. I should have gone the ATP route because it would have
Mhm.
got me done way faster. And then back in the day, it was still cheaper. And
Really?
yeah, oh yeah. And this was like
Sure.
back in 2012, I want to say, something like that. Anyways, so I ended up continuing to go through
Oh, it
the
was way cheaper at that point then, huh?
way cheaper.
Yeah.
And so I ended up going through getting my instrument. Uh, and then I was working on my commercial. American Flyers still had their programs back in the day. I think they just do the CFI refresher now. Back in the day, they were a pretty big school across the country.
Okay.
So they had the CFI Academy they used to run, which was like an on-site 30 or 40-day program where you paid, X amount. And then you went through their program and then you took all your check rides right at the end and then they would give you a job. And so I had signed up for that. And what happened was I had all the
Nice.
requirements for my commercial. I just hadn't finished it up yet. So they had an agreement with me saying, okay,
Hmm.
you could do that. And if you do the academy, we'll have you do your commercial, CFI, and double I all like in the same week. Just bang, bang, bang. And so I was like, let's get it done. I've been lollygagging for years. Yeah, it was wild. So I had
Okay.
everything booked. I had
Sure.
everything booked. And what happened was I had them all booked with the FISDO, like, over like a 2-week period. because you didn't have back in the day you could check with the
Okay.
FSDO and you didn't have to pay. You didn't have to pay for the check ride because they were charging like $1,000 a check ride in
Nice.
California at that point. It was retarded. So so I ended up
Yeah, because it's through the
so
FAA, right? So yeah, they're not going to
yeah,
charge you.
you have an
Okay.
FAA inspector do your ride, which and then everybody was scared about it. But when I looked at the FAA publishes the
Yeah.
failure, the pass fail spreadsheet, and it turns out those who were checking with the inspectors were actually getting a higher pass rate. They were, but everybody was so afraid of
Wow.
the FAA. Anyways, long and the short of it, the week I'm
Wow.
supposed to take my check rides is when the government shut down under the Obama administration. So everything got canceled. Was it back in 2013 or something like
Gotcha.
that? Everything got canceled. Had to wait like 2 weeks for the FSDO to even come
Okay.
back to work. Called them. They're like, it's going to be like 6 months till we can get you scheduled again. And I just ran out of money. Um, and at the time, I had applied
Right.
to the FAA to be a controller. Um, this is when they changed it to off the street hiring around that time. So I just kind of kept working. I was working as a paramedic back then. That
Yep.
was my previous career. And so kept working, ended up getting hired by the FAA a couple of years later. Was flying a little on the side, but just didn't have the funding to really finish it up. Um, and so then I went to work for the FAA for about a year and a half. I was an air traffic controller in one of the centers, and just wasn't for me. I wanted to fly. Um,
Yeah.
you really got to want to do that job. If you're really into it and that's what you want, awesome career, but just wasn't for me. So I ended up leaving the FAA, had some money saved up at
Gotcha.
that point, and was just done. So I just finished up my commercial real quick, but I didn't want to be a CFI. I knew that at that point. So I ended up finishing my commercial, and then I got hired to fly skydivers and Cessna 182s. And so went and did that. Um, Built up a bunch of
Nice.
hours. Soon as I had, man, I only had like 500 total time. I ended up applying to fly right seat in King Airs doing air ambulance out of a company that used to be based in Kansas,
Nice.
and they hired me. So I got in the right seat of King Air 90s and 200s flying air ambulances, which was awesome experience. And then after, I don't know,
Yep.
6 months of doing that, I saw a real cool job pop up in Seattle to fly King Air 350s as a right seater. And I just threw an application at it, and they called me immediately. They're like, "Oh, you're a current King Air guy, doing ambulance stuff.
Oh,
That's
wow.
awesome. Come on down." So they ended up like flying me to Seattle, first class, put me in a hotel. I was so not used to this at that point, because in the air ambulance world, you don't get all that stuff. And the DO picks me up
Yeah.
and drives
Yeah.
me to the interview. And on the way to the interview, he's like, "We're gonna stop and just do a drug screen just to make sure
He
you're
really
good."
wanted you.
Yeah. And so they the interview was more of a formality, and then they offered me the job. So it was so funny because I was just
Right.
the air ambulance company, they've gotten better, but the one I worked for didn't treat me that well. So I had all my stuff packed up in my
Yep.
car sitting in Denver airport, because I had to drive from Garden City, Kansas to Denver Airport to get the airline because there was like very limited air service. And so, and this was
Yep.
after Great Lakes went out of business. So they just didn't have the normal runs. Anyways, so took the job, flew back to Denver, grabbed my car, drove across the country, and found a place to live in Seattle. And went to work. They sent me to school, got a type rating in the King Air 350. Did that for a year. Awesome job.
Nice.
But I was just trying to build my hours so I could be a captain. We just weren't flying enough.
Yep.
We flew, but it wasn't enough to get the hours I needed. So I asked them for a raise. I said, "Hey, can I get a raise so I can go fly on the side? Rent airplanes to fly so I can build my hours so I can upgrade." And they're like, we just can't justify it. And I was like, "Hey, I get it, man." So I ended up picking up a job down in the Caribbean flying PC-12s, doing inter island stuff, flying to St. Bart, St. Martin, all the islands down there. Did that for, I don't know, a few months. And then COVID hit in 2020, and everything shut down. And
Yep.
I got furloughed, um, which is a reality of the career. It's going to happen at least once, if not twice in your career.
Yeah. Totally.
So got it out of the way early. I hope that was the only one, but I got furloughed. Um, went went back home, was on unemployment for a few months, and then I got a part-time job over the summer flying jumpers out in just south of Milwaukee. So I drove out there and was flying Twin Otters and 182s as well, and then King Airs and Kodiaks. And it's all about connections. The guy, when I learned to skydive in
Yeah.
Puerto Rico when I was living down there, and the guy flying the jump plane there is a good buddy of mine, and he ended up, he was my contact to get me the job in Milwaukee when I got furloughed. So networking's a huge part of this industry, and
Yep.
anyways, so flew jumpers
Totally.
over that summer, ended up flying jumpers around the country, went out to Oregon and flew jumpers, ended up in Dallas flying jumpers. It just wasn't paying enough for where I was and what I was used to getting paid at that point. And, jump pilot work's awesome. It's so much fun. It's
Yep.
crazy flying, but, there's only a few places where it really pays a lot. You really got to want to be in that lifestyle. And I was ready to move on with life. So, end up, for about 2 years at that point, I had been working on trying to get a job up in Alaska. I had a friend up there in Fairbanks who worked for one of the biggest operators in Alaska. And he'd run about 2 years prior to that. I had said, hey, I want a job. And every few months, he was running my resume into the DO's office up there. And just, they didn't have jobs, didn't have jobs, didn't have
Yep.
jobs. And then he just calls me out of the blue when I'm in outside of Dallas flying jumpers. And he goes, hey, man, you still interested? DO just walked in my office, asked for an updated resume. Sent it to him. A week later, I flew up to Fairbanks. Craziest interview of my life. Flying to Fairbanks, meet the guy. We talked for about an hour, and then he's like, "All right, let's go fly." And I was flying caravans and Twin Otters at the time, super caravans, but I'd flown stock caravans before in the jump world, but I wasn't used to the configuration on them. And so I'm like, okay. So he takes me out.
Yep.
We go flying. He puts me in some crazy situations, which pretty Alaska of them, and and so he comes back to have me shoot the practice ILS in Fairbanks. Turns out we end up in real IMC shooting the ILS, getting ice. It was crazy. And so then we did a few landings,
Yeah.
and at the end he's like, "All right, man, you got the job." I was like, "Sweet." So I ended up,
Nice.
yeah. So it was about a month and a half until I was up in Alaska flying, and I flew a season up there, which was incredible, amazing experience flying cargo and passengers, which is a whole nother episode I'll get into one point about. Then after that, came back down to the
Yeah.
lower 48 and got a job flying King Airs. I just needed to get back in. I was flying singles. I was flying PT-12s and caravans up there, and they had larger aircraft, but they had a 121 side that had larger airplanes, and it was going to take a while to move over there, and the industry was just moving, and so I knew that I just needed to get back into
Great.
multis. So I ended up getting a job as a captain on a King Air 200 down in the lower 48, flying charter. Did that, flew there for I don't know 6 months, and then they had a Citation Ultra, and they had a seat open up in the right seat of that. And so the owner said, hey, man, you want to move into the Citation? I said, yes, sir. So he got me typed, went and did that, and then flew for him for a while. And I was looking to get back to Salt Lake City because I was living basically based there for about a decade. A job opened up down in Salt Lake flying charters in Phenom 300s. So I went down there, flew the Phenom 300 for an operator. They ended up going out of business. Right around the time I saw the writing on the wall, I decided to jump into contracting because I'd done a little bit of it on the side over the past year, and it pays really well. And I had enough experience and confidence at this point, and I was single pilot.
Yeah.
I was single pilot typed. I went and paid for my single pilot exemption on the Phenom. Um, and I just said, you know what, screw it. And I took the leap of faith and quit the job and put myself out there as a contractor. And at the time, the market was so hot. This doesn't work for everybody, but I got my timing was perfect. People were calling me left and right. And I got hooked up with a great family out of Massachusetts who had a Phenom. Flew them around for almost a year. It was awesome. Did some other work on the side, but mostly for them. And but then I decided I was never home, which is part of what we'll talk about today. And so I decided I wanted to go to the airlines. It's where I always wanted to go
Yep.
from step one. So I threw some apps in, and got some callbacks. First airline interview I had, totally bombed it. Didn't even realize I bombed it. Didn't pay for the interview prep, which I should have. Bombed it. Thought I
Yep.
did great. They gave me the hey, thanks. Try reapplying in 3 to 6 months. So I had another interview
Sure.
scheduled with an operator, and so I went and paid the interview prep this time, and it was worth every penny because man, it made the interview feel like a joke comparatively. And so
Easy. Yeah.
yeah, and so I ended up I got the job, and so I left the charter world and went to the airlines, and that's where I'm at now, man. So yeah, that's a long version of my story to get here. Not the traditional route. A
You
lot
know,
of
you
sacrifices.
know what's so interesting though that is going to make this podcast. That's exactly right. I think what this podcast is going to show is how different everyone's journey can be to get to the same place, if that
Yep,
makes sense.
totally.
Because for me, I'm very typical from like college, CFI, cadet program that wasn't no strings attached. Got my job. They were begging me, when you get your hours, let's go. Because I was in 2022, the start of 2022. And
Yep.
like the industry was on fire, like you
Oh
said.
yeah, yeah. Your
And
timing was good.
I stayed there for about 2 years. And then, yeah, it was really good. And that's kind of what I want to bring up today of like, we're basically going to go through a ton of different stuff in our journeys of what we kind of would like to do differently or things that we would recommend. But long story short is we have very different perspectives on where we got, how we ended up where we did. And I think it's going to be really interesting for viewers to see the difference because a lot of this industry is timing. And if you hit it, you hit it. If not, and it depends on the funding, and there's so many different variables
Sure.
and to get you to where you want to be. And so I think that we have a really good plethora of skills to be able to help our viewers and be able to make a conversation. So
Yeah,
very
absolutely,
interesting
man.
story you have. That's for
Yeah,
sure,
yeah,
Scott.
yeah, for sure. Yeah. Well, like the episode today will be really about the stuff we wish someone had told us early on, right? So, uh,
Yes.
yeah, the big thing that we could start out with is the reality of time frames, man. I wish somebody would have told me this because, in the brochure for ATP or the school you go to, man, it's always like, yeah, yeah, sign up, give us this much money, and in 6 months you're done, and we'll have a job for you as a CFI. Uh, yeah, I mean that could happen.
And it's like, how are you supposed to know? Like if you don't know anything and every school is like, we're going to get you to an airline, like they have all the advertising, this is you in 6 months or a year. And it's like this industry is so convoluted sometimes when it comes to starting out and gaining the industry knowledge. Like
Yep.
there's just not many good sources. And it's
Yep.
like everyone has their own opinion. Everyone's stepmom's, grandma's, sister, whatever is going to tell you something. Oh, this is, how Uncle Benny did it. He went to the military. You have to have, perfect eye vision. Just all these things. And it's like, you don't know what to believe. So,
Right.
yeah, if you want to take us away on the reality of timeframes and just getting it started because I think it's really important for people to understand, especially with the industry changing the way it is right now versus the way it was 5 years ago or 3 years ago.
Well, that's the thing, man. That's a great point. It changes so rapidly. I mean, it could change overnight. Right now, it's kind of cooled off because, we're recording this April 2nd, 2025, right? So it cooled off last year because of the Boeing's issues with all deliveries. So everybody stopped hiring. It slowed down. There's not a lot of movement right now. But people are still hiring. I mean, from what I understand,
Yep.
Delta and United are still hiring like 1,000 pilots each this year. Well, when I started this journey professionally 6, 7 years ago, man, they were hiring maybe 100 people a year or something like that. It was crazy, and then it jumped up to the thousands, right?
Yep.
So it could jump up and down overnight. Um, so yeah, the flight schools are going to promise you the moon. That's what they do, right? It's all rainbows and sunshine and pictures of you wearing a uniform with your hat on and all that stuff. The reality, the reality is,
Yeah.
the reality is like airplanes break. CFIs get hired to go be airline pilots
Yeah.
or charter pilots. So then they quit, and then you have to find a new CFI. Man, the biggest one is finding DPEs. It used to be DPEs were regionally isolated. Well, right when I got out of training is when the FAA changed to where you could pick a DPE anywhere. You can go DPE hunting across the
Right.
country. For example, when I wanted to do my multi, I knew that there were really no multi instructors around the Salt Lake area that I could use. So I ended up going out to Kansas. They had a little accelerated, like 5 or 7 day program out there where they had their own DPE on
I've
standby.
heard of people using that one in
Yep.
Kansas.
So I went out there, did
Right.
that.
I've
It
heard of that
was,
school actually.
yeah, I mean, it was awesome. Like, it, it was my first real introduction to the fire hose of aviation because it was like you show up, you
Right.
get there day one, you settle in because you had like little private rooms above the hangar where everybody would stay. Day one, it's like settle in, meet everybody. Here's all the stuff you need to learn overnight. Day two is ground school, where they go over everything you need to know and you can ask some questions. And then day three, you're flying and you fly for 3 days and you're expected to know all this stuff. And then it's check ride. Now, if you're current and proficient on everything, then it's just learning, the multi engine aspect of it. So, but it is kind of a test to see if you can handle the fire hose, which was kind of cool. Anywho,
Can
so
I
yeah,
ask you, did they advertise what their failure rate
no,
was,
no, no, no.
like going into
Yeah.
that kind of program?
Yeah, I asked them about it.
Yeah.
And man, when I got there, I think the instructors were more honest about it. It actually wasn't as high as I expected it to be.
Sure.
I think it was like 50 or 40% first time fail, because
Because that's
it
pretty close to what the CFI fail rate was,
was it that
like
high.
the average. You
Okay.
know what I mean?
Yeah.
Regardless.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
yeah, I mean, I think it's probably like 35, 40%, something like that.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, that seems about right. Um, it's funny because if I were to try to go back now and do my CFI, it would be substantially easier because I have all the industry knowledge, right? But yeah, it would just be, now I know how to study and how to do all these things because I've been through so many fire hose. I've got 5 type ratings, like with all these fire hose programs, right? But that was my first intro to it. Um, yeah, so the actual timelines, they'll advertise 6 to 8 months at a lot of these places, right? If you do it full time. In the reality, from what most people I've seen, it's like,
Crazy.
yeah, it's like 12 to 18 months if you really put your nose to the grindstone. But you also have to like have no job, right? Like you have to have the funding and support, which it seems like more kids have nowadays. I'm running into more and more guys around the airport that I'll commute with, for some of the younger guys for the operators, and man, they're so lucky. Their mom and dad paid for them to go to wherever, and they have no debt. They don't
No.
have, the 100,000 loan that they're going to pay off for the next 10 years or something, to get into the industry. Um, so that's something that's changing a lot right now. But as for getting back to time frames, man, I would say if you're going to really do it full time and at most have a part-time job, probably like 12 to 18 months is a realistic expectation. You could do it in less than that if you're just really good at fire hose study and like live, breathe, and die this stuff. I would say that. You were a CFI, so how
One
long?
thing
Yeah, go ahead.
I think what's interesting right now is the whole industry is kind of lagging. And what I find interesting is I see a lot of people posting things online saying, I'm waiting 2 months for a DPE being scheduled. And I'm like, okay, well, people are still training like it's 2022.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone, the airline or the schools are telling these people, hey, we have a job on the other side. And what I find interesting is like everyone's bottlenecked at the CFI still. So
Yep.
there's no jobs for people coming at the moment. There are, but not like it was before. But that can change, like you said. But what I find interesting is how are DPEs still being scheduled 2 months out? I think that's kind of an interesting stat just for right now because it's like, well, how many people are continually training and what is that going to do to the rest of the industry on the lower end of CFIs and every other job, Part 135, everything like that, like jumping, like all this stuff that you started out with. And then also when it comes to expectations for me doing it the way I did it, at UND, the reason why I went from North Dakota to down in Arizona, their sister school, was because it took me like 7 months to go through the private pilot course, and it was because it's the winter in Grand Forks. Like
Mm-hmm.
There's just not much flying available. So I didn't finish until June. So it was about 6 months actually, but that's trying every single day. And I was like, you know what? I really want to get done faster. Long story short, I got done with my training about a year and a couple months faster than everyone else. But unfortunately, I went down to Arizona. I got hired for being an instructor down there January 5th, 2020. So if you can kind of think, we had the exposure of all the airlines in Asia that had their students come brought
Oh
to us and
yeah.
we would train,
Oh
right?
yeah.
So if you
Yep.
remember, everything started of COVID
Yep.
back in, I would say, end of January in China
Mm-hmm.
and all around Asia. And so it was really interesting because I remember like vividly, I had a conversation with my chief CFI, and she's like, "Yeah, like this weird disease is, I guess, going around. Like it should be nothing. Like we have no idea what it is, but it'll blow over probably in a couple of weeks." I just remember that was like the start of it, and then like 2 weeks later, it was forced to wear masks and everything like that. But
Shut down.
timing is so critical in this industry that if I would have waited, I would have been a year and a half behind everyone. And again, this industry, if you're going airlines,
Yep.
seniority is everything.
Yep.
So making that decision and having those difficult talks with whoever you're with, or if you're alone, you kind of got to in this beginning. If you want to go quick, you got to go where you can get flight time and put yourself in a position to succeed. Because if you don't, it's going to take longer than you're wanting to, or what the school is telling you it's going to take. Does that make
Right.
sense?
Yeah. That's a good point. Going down to a location like Arizona where the weather is favorable to fly all the time. Except in the summer, forget that, man. Which is why you guys all flew at night. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, so yeah, definitely
I still
flying.
did it middle of the day, man. I
Did you?
was
Oh,
as a CFI.
oh, you're
Yeah, dude.
brutal,
It went in the middle of
dude.
the day. Dude, I was
But hey,
going, our max temp was 42, and I went till 41 every day. And it's like, we got to do what we got to do. And it was bring a lot of water. That was kind
well,
of what we expected. So,
so you're
the life of a
highlighting
CFI.
you're highlighting yeah, well it's great because you're talking about sacrifices that you have to make, right? Like that's kind of the next thing we were going to talk about. Um,
Exactly.
man, you got to do what you got to do what you got to do, right? To get the hours because that's what it's all about. It's getting your time to get your 1,500 hours because that's the mandate now so that you can get to the airlines if that's your goal. Um, we're both airline pilots, but I spent 6 years in the 91 and 135 world. I think 4 of those years was flying charter. So like you don't have to go airlines. There's plenty of other jobs. I mean, if you want to just fly some family around in their private jet and you get that, we called it the unicorn job. But if you get that, man, good for you. The
Yep.
the the guy I flew with this last trip that we just got off of yesterday, he was a Part 91 guy on a Premier jet for I don't know 10 plus years before he went to the airlines. He was flying for a family that owned an oil company. And so, yeah, I mean those jobs are out there if you know the right people in the right places. It's all about networking. Really it is. Getting back to time frames though, you
Can I ask
know,
you one thing about
yeah.
that? So I think a lot of people, I don't think anyone's dream is going to be a CFI, right? Let's so you get your commercial and all of that. What is your advice to people to make that leap from commercial, multi, whatever it is, single? You have all of your basic fundamentals, licenses down. How do you go out and do that? Because for me, it was like, this is the next step is to go. I already got a job at the school. I'm going to pay for my training and then go from
Mm-hmm.
there. But like, I don't think anyone really, I mean, I'm going to say not everyone, but the large majority of people would rather go fly a King Air, do PC-12, whatever,
Mm-hmm.
and do
Oh,
anything but to instruct because
instead
that's
of being
not
an
what they're
instructor,
wanting to do as the end goal.
instead of being an instructor. Okay.
Yeah, to build that time. What can people do?
Well, so this puts us into the sacrifices section. It was a ton of sacrifice. Like, my brief overview I gave you seems all pretty and fun, but man, so for example, my first job flying skydivers was out of Miami Executive Airport. I had been applying to all these different places, and I was applying to aerial survey and skydive jobs because I knew that you can get hired at like I had like 300 hours at the time. So I applied. It was just everybody, they weren't really hiring. We were mid-season already for both those things. And I just get a random phone call. It was like Thursday afternoon. I get a phone call from a guy who's like, normally I wouldn't call somebody with 300 hours, but I just had a guy bail out on me and I need a pilot Monday morning to start flying skydivers in Miami. And I lived in Salt Lake at the time. And I said, okay, I'll be there. And he's like, great. He said, show up Monday. I'll
Yeah,
send my guy down. He's going to train you for a couple of days, and then you're off you go. It's a 182. And I was like, okay. So I literally that afternoon packed up everything I thought I would need, jumped in my car, slept in my car as I drove across the country in 3 days. I mean, I left on like Thursday night and got there on
yeah,
like Sunday night. And
yeah.
and to the southern tip of Florida, right? And he trained, the guy shows up the next morning. We flew together for a day, I think, was all it really took to kind of get me up to speed. And then the second day, he was just kind of there in case I needed questions or help. And that was it. And then he signed me off and I was flying jumpers. Um,
Sure.
so I did that. Just, man, Miami is brutal. I'm not a hot, humid weather guy. So did that for a couple months and then was like, you know what? I can't do a whole summer down here. I'm gonna die. So I ended up got a job back up in central Utah. There was a skydive operation that needed a second pilot in their 182. So I ended up just taking that job,
Nice.
being able to move home because Miami's so expensive, and I just wasn't making enough money to even. I was like making enough to barely cover food and rent, like, and that was it. In hindsight, would I have tried to stick it out for a few more months? Yeah, because I would have had way more flight time. But I was young and not thinking as much about that at the time. Then went back, flew jumpers in Utah. But when I got the offer to go fly King Airs in Kansas, it was the same thing. It was like, hey, are you available in a week? We need you in Wichita for ground school. And I was like, done. And so I just packed up my car and drove out to Wichita. And luckily they had employee housing for us to stay in.
So
And
could we?
then, what's that?
I was gonna say, so could we talk about this real quick? Like
Yeah.
all of your experiences to get those opportunities, you basically have to drop your life and go to those, and that doesn't have to always be the case.
No.
But a lot of the jobs that you're talking about to get those early ones, you got to go.
Yeah,
It
I was
seems
fine.
like, and
Exactly.
that's from other people I've talked to. Um, you got to do what you got to do. And so if you're looking to get an industry in that sense, like I have a kid now, I'm married. I wasn't in that position when I left for Arizona. It was just myself. So I think that's a really important thing to be eyes wide open going into this industry is especially in the beginning, there's so much volatility and same with airlines too.
Sure.
But like just getting those opportunities, you need to know people, you need to put yourself out there. But then you also need to make tough decisions and like talk to your wife, talk to your husband, whoever, and say, hey, if we're going to go do this, we have to accept if we want to get it done fast and do all those things, we're going to have to make sacrifices. And that's going to be, I'm not going to lie, that's a tremendously hard thing to convince the whole family to do. So just keep that open and wide open, I guess you could say, for your eyes
Right.
before you leap into it because it's expensive and you want to make sure you know what you're getting yourself into.
You highlighted the perfect point, which was I wanted to move up quick. I wanted to get into the turbines in the Maltese. I wanted to get that because I knew I talked to enough people that told me, like, I was like, I want to go fly charter for a while. I want to fly private jets and stuff. And they're like, you need turbine time. That's got to be your top goal no matter what. And so for
Right.
me to go that route, it was like, okay, I need turbine time. Well, then I'm going to do whatever it takes. In that case, it was drive to Kansas and go live in Kansas for a while to fly in the right seat of King Airs. And I only had 500-ish hours when I got hired to do that, right? Having a little life experience, I got into the industry later. I didn't become an air traffic controller till I was 32. And then, I was in my mid 30s by
Right.
the time I started flying professionally. So it definitely made me a little more attractive. Reality is, man, if you're 20 or 21 years old and you're just getting out of flight school, you're competing with all the other
Let
20,
it rip.
21-year olds.
That's what I would say.
Yeah. So the life experience is a big one. That definitely helps, you know, for anybody listening to this who's a little bit older, that's going to help you stand out from the crowd if you've had a previous career. I had a previous career in EMS, had military experience and all that, and I was a controller. So that helped set me aside from just the dime a dozen CFI fresh out of, you know, one of the collegiate programs or
Yeah.
141s. But it was a lot of sacrifice, man. So, and then like I said, then dropping the medevac job to go fly King Air 350s in Seattle, where I literally packed up my car and drove across the country again. Now, yeah, like you said, I'm single, no kids. That helped a ton. I know a lot of guys who are married or married and have kids. And in those scenarios, it's a little harder. You got to get your spouse on board. In your scenario, you've got a wife and kid now, right? So like,
Yeah.
yeah, so like, for you to
Yeah.
pick, I know you guys just moved bases, and you had to convince your wife to move across the country with you,
Yeah.
you know, um, whereas I could have been like, whatever, I'll just do
Well,
that.
yeah. I think for me and this is a totally different topic, but I think you got to find something that's going to be a sweet spot for both of you. And for it just lucked out that me and my wife both love where we live, and it wasn't like one or the other didn't like it. It was like we'd made the decision for our family to do it, but it's tough to convince. Like in your case, be like, hey, let's go to Salt Lake, see, or go to Miami, see how this is. Like it's really hard for families because you don't have stability. And I think for as a man, providing stability for your family is difficult when you don't know if you're going to go to a new job, and you kind of have to create that. Like if you make that big move, it's I don't know how it's possible, but I'm sure people can do it. But I would say I think that you have to be okay with sacrifices in life where you might not get all the flight time. Like if you're someone in my position now, I think I have a little bit hindsight is 20, not hindsight 2020, but like being a father now and being a husband, I think of that perspective, being in that position totally differently than I did when I was 21 and doing it, where I couldn't do that because I'm like, that's my marriage and my family life is just going to go down the toilet because it's like, I need that stability for myself, but then for my family too. So it's like, you
Mm,
have to be okay with the pros and cons of it. And you know what I
mm-hmm.
mean? Like you can't, because if you do that all selfishly, then it puts off everyone else's life choices and say, hey, this is all about me, which I understand. And this is not so much a marital thing, but I'm just saying this is real life. And these are kind of the conversations I would have in flight deck saying, if someone asked me, being like, I don't know if it's the right decision to go and do that because aviation is not everything about life. And it's like, this is great that you're trying to do that, but you have to look at your entire life picture and make a decision based on that. So, hey man, you might not hit the hiring spree, but at least you are still happily married and everyone else is happy in your life and you're still building time another way. So, long story
Yeah,
short, balance is key for someone
right.
who's married with kids, whatever. But if you're single, dude, go after it. Like, if you don't have responsibilities, you need to go after it because that is how you're going to advance extremely quickly if you have that ability to.
Yeah, if that's what you want, absolutely. Balance is a whole nother episode I'd like to do at some point. Like you made a comment there
Yeah,
about it's not all about
totally.
aviation. But when if you're young and that's what you want, man, if you decide this is what I want to do, and you figure out the path to it, whether it's, you know, airline or Part 135 operator or Part 91 private jet, whatever it is. Step one, figure out what you want to do. Step two, figure out the steps you need to take to get there. And then you need to be, especially if you're single and young, that should be everything you do from that point on. Because those are the people, we see all these people we meet along the way in this industry that you'll network with and meet in the airport or wherever, and it's the guy that gets out of that private jet and you're like, I want to be like him when I grow up, right? Well, you don't know what he had to do to get there or she had to do to get there, right? Like, you don't know the
Yeah,
sacrifice. Like I'm telling you the story about literally picking up my life multiple times to drive back and forth across the country. Same thing with Alaska. you know, I had my start date set up once I got the job in Alaska, and then I packed everything into my car and I drove through Canada. This was during COVID. Man, the way they treated me at the border, they treated me like some kind of terrorist. They're like, Are you vaccinated? Do you have all this proof and all these things?
Sure.
Like they literally pulled me out of my car and like searched my car. It was crazy. I'm like, this is Canada. Like this is like what the
Yeah.
hell's going on here, right? And I drove through Canada for 4 days
Right.
where, under the COVID restrictions was a nightmare. You're only allowed to stay in certain places. But I did all that to get to the job that I had been chasing for 2 years up in Alaska, and I flew my butt off that summer.
Yep.
Amazing experience, made a ton of money, and got the hours to go get me to the next step. Then I picked up and drove, and then I came back down to the lower 48, put my car on a boat that time, just doing what I had to do to get where I wanted to be. My path was a lot longer than most people. I went kind of the long way around it, but the experience I got when I showed up to my airline class, I thought I would be one of the most experienced people and the most inexperienced people in the class. Yeah, it was the opposite of that actually. The majority of people in my class were collegiate, restricted ATP, or rotor transition guys. Because
Yep.
the pilot pool right now has gotten pretty thin. The legacies are a little more selective because they're eating off all the other operators. The non-legacy operators in the past few months they've been able to be a little more selective, but couple years ago when I started, that wasn't the case. So, anyways, a
Hey,
lot of sacrifices, man. And just staying the
can I make
course.
one point on that real quick?
Sure.
Yeah, I think right now, and this is different than what my uh, story was because I got pretty lucky with the timing, right? And I hear a lot of guys, they look at someone like me in my position and they're like, oh, well, you don't know what real sacrifice is and all that. And it's like, but I totally understand. Everyone has to go through a crazy amount of stuff, and I'm not God's gift to aviation, that's for sure. But what I'll say is, I think getting in this industry, you have to accept realities of timeframes, kind of like what we talked about before. And you can't get in your mind, especially in the beginning of flight training, the end goal. So let's say you can't fly for 2 days for weather or your instructor got sick, whatever. You can't be like, man, that's 2 days. I'm not going to have seniority, whatever. And I would get in that. Like, I flew with a lot of guys like that. I got into it because it was around me
Mm-hmm.
of like getting into this thing, being like, I need to push so hard because if I don't get it, then I might not, COVID might happen, like, or some event like that might happen. And I could be left on the sidelines. You try your hardest and accept that, hey, I'm doing the best I can. And if something happens, then we take it with the punches. But like, I don't think it's a realistic thing anymore to be like, I'm going to go from CFI to, I don't know, Republic Airlines to be there for 4 months. And then I'm at JetBlue and then I'm on Delta, whatever. Like,
I
if
have
you go to
friends that did
Republic,
that.
SkyWest, it's 5 years, bro. You're,
Yeah.
yeah, but like I'm saying right now, it's 5 years. It's half a decade of your life you're committing to that airline.
Yes.
So
Well,
the industry has tangibly changed.
yes.
And one really quick thing to go off of what you said about Delta United American, basically, yeah, it's the aircraft deliveries, but you have to understand too, in this hiring market, you have 15 or 1,700 captains with thousands of hours on the Airbus at Spirit that
Mm-hmm.
their company is going through Chapter 11, went through Chapter 11. They're burning $100 million since January. That was the last time
Yep.
that those were updated.
Yep.
And yeah, summer's coming around, so we'll see how it goes. But genuinely, like, if my company is burning $100 million, if we only have 900 million or something like that left of liquidity, like, what do you expect them to do? Obviously, they're all going to take the class days. So it's an
Sure.
incredibly difficult thing. And this is another thing, sacrifice. Those guys had 20 years seniority at Spirit.
Yep.
They were making 400 grand a year, best schedules. They have to go and start at the bottom, but they're making a sacrifice because they know that they have to do something. And that's just the way the industry goes. So don't think it's, oh, once I get to the airlines, it's going to be okay. You have 20-year guys, 40 or 50-year-old guys have been doing this a long time, and they're going to
Yep.
have to start all over. Granted, it's at a really good company, but it's, dude, that's a tough pill
Sure.
to swallow for people. And so
It
again,
is.
go in eyes wide open, guys. You need to go in eyes wide open because you don't know what the heck is going to happen in your career. So I don't know. That's my point of view. I just wanted, I'll step off my soapbox. But
No,
anyways,
I love it. It's you're speaking reality, man. Um, you're definitely you're really highlighting it from a point of the airline seniority route. It's if that's since we're both airline pilots, obviously we'll lean more towards that. From the airline perspective, what you said is dead on. It's when I was still flying King Airs and charter stuff, and I had a buddy who was he was an old Redwood guy, Virgin America, and then he ended up at Alaska, and we had several conversations about it, and he kept so funny. He tried to talk me out of going to the airlines for so long because of the reality of that stuff. They'd gone through buyouts, and he had been through
yeah,
furloughs previously and all these things. Companies he had worked for had gone out of business. When he realized he wasn't gonna talk me out of it, then he went straight to seniority. He's like, "Man, look, stop screwing around. Stop wasting time at these charter operators. Get your hours and go to a regional." And I just was like, "Oh, I don't want to do that. I want to
yeah,
fly private." And I wish I'd listened to him because I would have got seniority way earlier. It is all about seniority. Especially,
everything.
it's everything in the airlines. In the 121 airline world, it's everything. Period. End of story. Whether it's a union or non-union company, I think SkyWest is all seniority based, isn't it? Yeah, they're not a union
Yeah, it's all
carrier, but
seniority based.
it's all seniority based. So for them and for all the Alpa
Yeah,
carriers and
yeah,
even all the non-Alpa carriers, like it's all seniority. So getting your seniority number locked in ASAP is key. But like you said, yeah, nowadays it's going to be probably a couple of years at a regional, maybe a little less. I really think that hopefully
well, half a
the
decade. You have to.
yeah, well, I'm kind of going more the route of like
For
I think
Republican
that
SkyWest.
yeah, but what I'm saying is I think they'll finally I think we're going to get Boeing cleaned up here hopefully in the next 6-12 months. Hopefully they get production going again. The big thing, and then they get those 7.3s coming back out the door at a reasonable pace. And once they do that, then we're going to see the legacies and and Southwest start hiring again because they're going to be getting their airplanes. The only reason we're in a slowdown today is because Boeing screwed up big time, and the government said, okay, no, we're you've had your privileges taken away now, and unfortunately, down the pipeline, it screws everybody in the industry over. And Airbus, a lot of people are leaning Airbus, but man, there's only so much Airbus can do. There's only so many orders they can fulfill. Without sacrificing quality assurance, and hopefully they learned from Boeing's mistake, and they're not going to make that mistake. We both fly the bus, right? Like, and luckily the
Yeah,
quality on the bus is pretty damn good. I've had minimal coming compared to flying in the charter world and stuff, man. The maintenance on the airline level is amazing.
right.
It's so nice to just say, "Oh, something's broken, call maintenance," and then they take care of it. And there's very strict rules on what can be MEL'd and what can't, which is really helpful.
Yeah.
But you're gonna have to make sacrifice. There's gonna be times there's a lot of every like 5 to 7 years there's a slowdown in the industry, right? COVID was 2020. For me, 2013 when the government shut down is when I felt the first one. That was with my check rides and stuff, which put me back a couple of years. Then I got furloughed in 2020, and here we are. We're in 2025 now. We're 5 years in, so something in the next couple of years might happen. We're dealing with the Boeing slowdown right now, which is still kind of a backlog from we're still dealing with a lot of the supply chain issues from COVID. Who knows what's up next in the industry?
But there's
Um,
still like 2,000 people. There's still like 2,000 people being hired now, or like 5,000 or something, like thousands of
oh yeah,
people.
thousands,
Like Americans
thousands.
still hiring like
Oh,
1,200. Delta's
gangbusters,
still
man.
hiring 500. United's hiring 1,000 or 1,200.
Yep.
So people like this is again kind of what we talked about, like the realities of the situation. People need to know in the last couple of years that if you came out of a regional or flight training, that was not normal. Like that's not how these things roll. And
Right,
um,
right, right.
like it doesn't just you don't just get handed a job at a legacy carrier in like 10 minutes. So I think people need to understand this is still the best hiring that we've had like
ever.
since
No, ever.
2019,
Ever.
2017,
No,
like
no, no. This is
ever
the
still
best period ever
in
prior to,
2025
yes,
still.
still. Prior to 2018, 2019,
Yeah,
it took decades. It would take you a decade
literally.
to get from zero to even a low cost carrier, if maybe a legacy, if you're lucky, at least a decade. And then all of a sudden, overnight,
Yep,
they start hiring thousands of pilots a year, and you can go straight, you could skip the regionals and go straight to a one, a mainline 121 carrier if you have a collegiate background or whatnot. That's unprecedented. Never in history before now has that happened. So this is a whole nother episode we'll do, but like, getting into the younger guys who they didn't even
totally.
experience 9/11, they didn't experience 2007, they didn't experience 2013 or even 2020 because they got in after COVID, right? Like these guys are coming in, and it's awesome that we're in a point in time where people can come in and make the kind of money that they make right out of the gate, and that you can go straight into an Airbus or a 73 or a 220 or a big airplane. That's fantastic, but the people need to realize, like, that's new. That has not always been that way. That most of the people you're flying with,
Totally.
it took me. I started my aviation journey. I think I took my first flight lesson in 2011. It's 14 years ago. Like, it took me 14 years, well, 13
Long
years
time.
basically. Yeah, 13 years to get to an airline. Now I did go the non-traditional route, right? Okay, I could have got it done in 8 or 9 years probably. But I also was working full time in a previous career, and so I didn't have the financial backing that a lot of kids are fortunate enough to have today to be able to give everything up and do it. I had to work a full time job. I was married back then. It was a totally different experience for me. But if you have the opportunity to
Hey,
go for it, man, go for it. Good for you. I am stoked that people are able to get
go
in
for it.
and not make $20 an hour to fly in the right seat of a Beech 1900, living on top ramen. I'm glad we're not there anymore.
Totally.
Uh, but to your point, John, yes, it's a unprecedented time in the industry. So like,
26 and the Airbus, 77% seniority in my company. I'm 26. Like, I
yeah,
mean, so like you said, it's unprecedented. Like, I am the
yeah,
byproduct of the last 4 years. And I have, here, I'll say this too. Everyone that was hired about 7 to 8 months earlier, this is again, like, I'm totally happy where I'm at. But 8 months, if I would have been, I probably would have been in a different position where a lot of my people a couple months before me. But that's how fast everything can change with hiring.
yeah.
Is it just changes radically. So the best advice I would have for you is if you want to do this job, do it and accept the realities like we talked about. But then also when there's a downturn, there's what comes up must come down. But then also in this industry, there's always going to be good times and bad times. It seems like if you go back to the last 100 years of aviation. And so if you're in this industry long enough, it rewards people who stick around and wait for the timing to grab that job that you really want. It might not just happen right away, or it could. It's timing, man. So that's my advice to everyone is if you love it, get in and accept the realities and go for it. That's where I'm at, kind of.
No, 100%, man. I completely agree with you. So we covered all that. So now it's like, so next we can move on the last section here of like the preparing for 121 training. How it compares. Now, if you've been through like an academy like ATP, you understand at least a little bit what the fire hose is. um, I'm not sure how the collegiate programs do it. I think they're a little more spaced out, but let's talk about okay, I came in with type ratings and jet time when I started at a 121 carrier. So it was a lot different for me. I won't say easier, but I had a good set of base knowledge on what to expect in training. You came from the CFI route? Oh no, you came from a regional route. Okay, but you went to a regional from CFI. So you'd be the perfect person to give advice on this section on on how to transition from that.
So with my kind of story, UND and Embry, and I'm sure there are 141 programs out there, they designed their training kind of like an airline training in a way. What I
Okay.
mean by that is everything has SOPs. There's like, I guess the POH, but it's like specifically written for you. I believe, I could be wrong, but like there's specific things in there. Everything is specified just how our documents are at our airline, right? So everything is kind of structured in the way leading you up to getting you to regional training. So I also was an end of course examiner doing certificate granting rides. So I was actually giving
Oh,
people their check rides.
okay.
So I had a good fundamental understanding of how exams worked, orals worked, kind of the training that went involved in that. But what I'll say is, and this is what's interesting too. So I was 18 when I started. And so it was a really kind of maturing event going through flight school and having a couple fails and learning from my mistakes on my own check rides, right?
Okay.
And I think like going back, and again, I'm 26, right? But I have a lot of life lessons I've learned in the last 10 years or 8 years, whatever it is, in this industry on being. I went pretty quick for 141, and what I'll say is making that transition to the 121 world. Um, really understanding the fundamentals of getting in the books every single day if you can go through and before lessons and doing everything you need to do to set yourself up for success in the training world and GA, because when you get to the airlines they expect you to be able to reference your documents and to be able to know those things because this is your job in a 121 world.
Mm-hmm.
um, if you don't have that basic fundamental understanding of okay, this is what's expected of me, I need to know this information
Mm-hmm.
and be able to fully understand it, not just like kind of a base knowledge. And that's one thing I would say is slowing down once you get to your regional training or wherever you're going to go, and try to really understand what's going on. Not just kind of absorb the skin, like the surface layer, but really have a good working understanding of the knowledge that you're going for. So, a couple things: there's exemptions for secondary alternates on paperwork, and it going from CFI to understanding those technical things were so different. And I needed to sit down with the guy teaching the class. I said, I need you to like dumb this down like I am going through. I'm a student pilot
Mm.
because I could not grasp the understanding, and other people had a complete, hey, this is so easy, like it's not a big deal. But there's
Right.
certain things that like I think going through that process, like don't be scared to say I don't know how to do this, and go seek your help from your classmates, because just like you, Scott, like everyone is coming from a different perspective in their training and their career
Yep.
into that classroom, and it's
Yep.
like I am the last person to tell you I know everything because I obviously don't, and I need as much help as possible. Because at the end of the day, we're not competing against each other. And that was some of the weird stuff I went through at the regional was some of the guys were like trying to compete against other
Mm.
people, and it's like, yo, we already have jobs.
Yeah.
Like we can share the information with people. We're on the same team. So
Ooh.
I guess that's one point of view I would say on that. And
Yeah. Can I
one
sidebar
last
there
quick
real
thing I would
quick?
add is, yeah, go
Yeah.
for it.
So you just brought up the critical point. I noticed this when I was in the FAA Academy, and then I noticed it again in the w- I noticed it in the charter world in the type ratings, but I really noticed it in our airline training program. Group study was critical, like working together as a team to find your weaknesses, because everybody has a
Totally.
weakness on training, right? But like you don't know what you don't know. And when you work together as a group and you do group studies, for us, in the airline training program, they had put us all in this hotel, and there was a group of us that would go down every night by the fire pit and sit around it and just go through our iPads and documents. And hey, I have a question about this, and somebody else might understand it better. Like you were saying, having the instructor explain it in a way that you can understand. Well, somebody else in that group might be able to do that for you. Or they could ask a question that you're like, oh man, I didn't even consider that. I didn't even consider, I don't know anything about that. And it would just never had any problem sparking conversations and discussions.
Totally.
Critical component. The people that, whether it was in my FAA Academy when I was a controller, or private jet training, or now airline training, the people who were the weakest and the ones that failed out were the ones who did not do group study, that thought they could just do it on their own, and they were better than everybody. Now, caveat to that, there are people that can do it on their own that are better studying by themselves. However, when you go to the airlines, it's not single pilot operations. That's another episode that we'll talk about them trying to move towards that.
Totally.
But it's not single pilot. You are working as a team. From now on, you will be there is a co-pilot that you work together with. You're never working against them, you're always working with them. And so you need to start ingraining in yourself right now, working as a team, studying as a team, trying to succeed as a team. So double click out of that. You can keep going.
I totally agree with that. I mean, yeah. So, I mean, just to go off of that really quickly, we were in in Atlanta 2 nights ago, and talk about external pressures. My wife's birthday was the next day. Captain was in time at 3 a.m. We have all these different things. Deferred APU. We have one bathroom in op in the front. The other one where we have 180 plus people or something like that, and we have all these external things going, ground stop in LaGuardia, and we're kind of going through this. And he's a newer captain. He's a couple months or a couple weeks off of OE operating experience there, training. So he's a newer captain, and this is where working as a team was super critical in this job. Being like, I'm thinking of things, trying to make his life easier as a captain, but he's also including me in that loop because he knows I'm not a spring chicken when it comes to doing this. I have couple thousand hours of 121 time now, and it's like
Mm-hmm.
I can be a benefit in his mind, and even fresh out of training, because sometimes you're way better at knowing and being able to remember certain things the way the book is supposed to have you operate.
Yep.
And I think being able to have that cohesion as a team, and this is another topic we'll get into another time, but like even if there's a 30-year age gap, to have you feel like you have someone else who's competent and can bring something to the table. And I think that's super critical in this industry is like you are not alone up there. Yeah, you
Right.
have someone who is just maybe not just as qualified in terms of like experience. Like there's might be some things to learn, but you have the certificate, you passed the training,
Yep.
so use that person as a resource because at the end of the day, anyways, that's CRM. That's another topic. But
Sure. No, it's great.
I think getting back to what you were saying about small groups or group study, 2 to 4 people, maybe five, but 2 to 4 people is kind of the sweet spot.
Yeah.
And anything bigger, then everyone starts kind of having different side conversations
Yeah.
and it can go into not being a hindrance almost.
Yeah,
So
I can
my
see
advice
that.
to people is find some people with different experience levels, maybe, um, and someone that you know that you're going to get along with and can communicate well with, and just be professional because I'm not going to say too much, but there's people from all age ranges and different maturity levels, and maturity is not necessarily by age, right? And I would just say choose your friends in class wisely
Sure.
and stick with them, and bring in new people. But like I'm not going to say protect that group, but like I don't open it up to an immense amount of people in terms of like people can come in, but like it does not work well when you have 10 people in a room and you just start talking and it's just like, oh my gosh, now it's 3 hours later. What have we gotten completed in this 3 hour time frame?
Yeah, that happens a lot.
So
Yep.
that's kind of my advice. And so if you can limit it to 4 people or whatever your number is, that's my advice because then you guys are going to be dedicated and say, all these different information because everyone's reading different things. And I couldn't read the book. Like you go through volume 2 or volume 3 of an airline SOP, standard operating procedures, and you're going to be bored to death and fall asleep. And especially one other thing, I know I'm kind of going on a rant here, but like when you get done at 5 p.m., your brain is like mush. Like
Yeah.
you're so tapped out in
Yeah.
terms of you just had a fire hose of information. You probably went through over 1,000 slides that day of
Right.
information. And now you're going to go back
Right.
and you're going to study for the next 4 hours. And it's
Right.
like, it's incredibly difficult to do that. So make sure you're eating well, make sure you're staying hydrated. And I always told the guys that I studied with, I need about an hour to like
Yep.
completely decompress,
Yep.
go take a shower, and like we'll reconvene and go from there and just focus on and kind of create like a study guide of what you're going to do that night and try to go from there. And it's
That's a great
like,
point.
it sucks. I mean, some of it, yeah,
No, no, keep going.
but that's my information. I
Oh,
mean,
okay.
so let's see. Outside of that, I think that really gets into classroom work, but then getting into, let's see, the procedures I saw
Mm,
in my regional, I would say 15% fail, like completely fail out. And it was guys coming from non 141 programs, like guys going from not crop dusting, but like aerial survey.
sure.
So people not having IFR experience, not knowing how to do
Yeah.
procedures
Yep.
and flows, and like they couldn't keep up with the jet. So that's another thing too, being a little bit older. Like we had a couple guys in their 50s, they failed unfortunately because it was just too fast for the jet, or the jet
Yeah.
was too fast for their learning style.
Yeah.
And dude, those things are $1,000 per hour to run, and
Yeah.
they're not going to step or sit by and just keep giving you time. They might give you a little bit more time, but they're not going to fund you for an extra month, to be
Right.
there and to slow you down at the regional level. At Delta, maybe,
Right.
I don't know. I'm
Yeah,
not there.
like
So,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
anyways,
Right, the regional level is a little more. Although, most regionals have AQP, which is, I didn't go through an AQP program, but from what I understand, it's a much better structured program for people coming without the experience. Um, the program I
it was
went through
pretty good. Yeah.
yeah, okay, so yeah, you went through an AQP then?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. It was pretty
Um,
good. I think the only thing I would add to that is I think you could fail two things. So if you failed like your systems validation and one maneuvers validation, you are
mhm.
fired. Right? You're gonna be forced to resign.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
I
that's how
mean,
most.
it's not difficult, but like there's pressure in that sense.
Sure. Well, but you have to put the work in, uh, the big thing is,
Obviously, yeah,
yeah, profiles and flows, that's we didn't even really have that in the corporate world. There's no, like, for most jets, there's no published flows. Like, it's kind of, you figure it out as you go. The sim instructors teach them to you when you get your type ratings, but very few corporate operators or charter operators or whatnot actually have like SOP style flows like the airlines do. Um, so, flows, profiles, and memory items and limitations are the big ones with any type rating, but especially at the airlines, because they expect you to have studied
yeah,
those and know them cold when you enter the simulators. Um, and so, like, from day one, those of us who had type ratings, when we started at my airline class, we all knew, like, okay, we got to do our memory items and limitations. We need to know those. So most of us came into class because they sent us the material a couple weeks before. Most of us came into class knowing those things cold. And so then for us, it was okay. Once you figure out who your sim partner is, then you guys sit down with your paper tigers, which are the big paper mock-ups of the cockpit they give you, and you guys start practicing your flows together. A lot of the airlines offer, like, what do they call them, procedures trainers or whatnot, basically like mock cockpits that, some of them might have switches or they might just be paper tiger mock-ups where you can go and sit down at the training facility. And there are some of us that would be there all night, doing that and studying at the facility because you had access to it 24 hours a day. So it's just how much you're going to put into it, right? Like, this is what I want to say with that. I'm going to get on my high horse for a minute here, right? Like, look, you're being given an opportunity that most people will never ever experience. You're being given an opportunity to have a job where you're going to work less than half the year and make more money than the majority of the population will ever make a year. So you cannot take it lightly. It needs to be, you need to be 100% dedicated to this. The people that don't take it seriously, they fail out. The airlines don't have time for that. They don't want people like that. You're not entitled to it. You never were. You had to earn it, And for us in the industry who are successful, we respect the people who put the effort in. Something that I've asked a lot of the senior guys and check airmen about recently, because we have a lot of younger guys coming into the industry that were collegiate guys or went straight from CFI to flying 121s in Airbuses. And it's like, you know, they had to pay their dues a different way, right? The kids that went through the collegiate programs, they busted their asses for 4 years in college to pass and get where they're at today. So they paid their dues differently, but they paid their dues. Now that doesn't mean you get the entitlement after doing that. You're not entitled to succeed in an airline just because you did that.
Sure.
Just like my, 6 or 7 years before I got to the airlines of hard work and sacrifice didn't entitle me to be successful at an airline. I still had to work my butt off. When I was in airline training, man, that was all I was focused on for the month and a half I was in training. It was That's all I lived, breathed, and eat,
You
for
have to have it like that.
100%. 100%. If you don't, it's very obvious. The instructors see it and it puts you at a disadvantage. And they're gonna see the weakness and they're gonna exploit it. Because that's what they do. They want people who want to be there and who are gonna put the effort in and that are gonna earn it. The ones that aren't, they're not going to survive, and they're going to wash out. And if they somehow make it through the training program, well, then the check airmen are going to wash them out in OE, or the line check airmen are going to wash them out when they're weak and fail at flying the line. There's a lot of checks and balances in place to prevent weak people from sticking around because with the DCA crash that we recently had, it shows how serious, and then the Toronto issue, Toronto incident, it shows how serious a job this is. Like, people need to understand, we don't make a lot of money to sit there and have these conversations when the autopilot's on, right?
This is right.
We make a lot of money
Yeah.
when something goes wrong. That's what we're there for, or to prevent something from going wrong. The younger guys who've never seen a big incident until recently, it's kind of a wake up call because in an Airbus 320 or 321, depending on who you work for, 150 to 200 plus people are behind that door when you close it. Like, that's a lot of freaking responsibility. You're not getting paid to take pictures and post your stuff on Instagram and just
Right.
to do that. You're getting paid to keep these people safe, to get them there safely, and if something goes wrong, to fix it and make sure nobody gets hurt. That's what we get paid a lot of money for. And so that's my high horse. That's my soapbox. You got to put the effort in.
You're right, though.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. But if you take it seriously and you put the work in, what I did learn, and I've learned with, like I said, I have 5 types and a couple other training programs I went through over the, past 7 or 8 years. If your instructors see you putting the work, look, not everybody learns the same. Some people struggle with certain things, right? Some people learn differently. But if they see you putting in the effort 99% of the time, if they see it, they're going to try to help you out. And if you need just a little extra time, they'll see that and then they'll try to accommodate you. Like you said, like, they won't give you an extra month, but if they see, oh, you know what, this guy can benefit from one extra sim session, that I think that's what he really needs, that'll make everything click. They'll give it to you. A lot of them have the leeway to do that. Look, man, ultimately what it comes down to is, you got to put the effort in, the time, the study habits, the group study, and you need to live and breathe it for, the month and a half, 2 months, whatever your training program is, because, that's what you're there for. That's the
Totally.
opportunity you were given. It, it, it's not a walk in the park, but if you put the effort in during training, it pays off in the long run. Because if you study good up front, then later on, you're not worried about what you don't know when you're flying. And you get a lot more respect from everybody as you go. I guess we can wrap it up here. Put episode one or pilot episode, whatever we want to call it, in the books. What do you got? What do you got on anything
I think
else you
that's
want to
pretty
talk
fun.
about? Yeah.
Nope, I got a 3 day trip coming up tomorrow and a 2 day after that. And I think just all in all, what we're trying to do here is give really good advice to people coming up, but then also to everyone in the industry. We want this to make a show where you can drive into work and it's just like you're talking to one of your captains or FOs or whatever, just about the industry stuff happening lately. So I know we have a lot of different topics we want to cover. Boeing, Airbus. We want to talk about the hiring. We want to talk about weekly events, stuff that comes up as different things come and go. So I think the biggest thing for the viewers to know is we're really excited to bring an episode to you, hopefully weekly. But we're both pilots and we both have schedules, and so we're going to do our very best. But I also would recommend everyone, if you want to listen to this. Again, this is episode 1, so we're working out the kinks. Please follow us, subscribe, write us a review. We would really appreciate that. And we're always looking for cool people to talk to and kind of hear your perspective on the industry.
Yep.
So I would recommend anyone, if you want to, write us an email, write us whatever you want to do, and we'll kind of go from there.
Yeah, we have a website, autopiloton.com. You could also email us at autopilotonpodcast@gmail.com. We're setting up social media. We're going to distribute this on YouTube and Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And yeah, like you said, John, we're going to try to do it weekly if we can. The nice thing is you could do it from your hotel room on your overnight, or if you're at home like I am. We're always looking for things to talk about. Email us, message us on the social media apps. If you have ideas, we'd love to hear from you. Might even have you on an episode. We're definitely going to try to get into having a guest or two every episode going forward. Like John said, this is just working out the
Sure.
technical glitches, which we just recovered from one where the whole thing froze up on me and started echoing. So that's what took me off my soapbox rant. I guess that was the universe's way of telling me to shut up. So, but yeah, thanks everybody for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next one.
All right, see you guys.